Hey guys, Smurf back here again to talk about a question I get a lot, which is how I brew decks and kind of how I make the card selections, because I do tend to play a lot of unconventional things. And the perfect example that I'm going to use to kind of talk about this is going to be going through a couple of deck lists and kind of the enablers and payoffs for a new ATP 6 card we recently had spoiled thanks to Vin on the Alpha Trion Protocols website, and that is Lost in Research. So Lost in Research is a new type of stratagem that we're introducing in this set, which is the mission stratagems. They are new, like I said, a new stratagem. They don't give you immediate value, but they only require you to play one character at least with the trait that they care about. This one is going to be Lost in Research. So as long as you can play 3 battle cards from your hand during a single turn, you'll get to complete this and get to reap the rewards. What those rewards are is you draw a card at the start of your turn, like an additional card. So it's a pocket processor at worst. But then you can scrap that card or any other card from your hand at that time to play an action. So you can cash this extra draw in for an extra action play during your turn. But also, whenever you play an action, one of your specialists gets +1 attack until end of turn. But more importantly, on top of all this, is it's a common. So that means in the format of Junkion, where a lot of times people feel like they don't have a lot of options in deck building, this is going to open up a whole new avenue to that, build a whole new, enable whole new archetypes that haven't existed before, and give these archetypes access to Pocket Processor in an all commons format that can't be removed. So if you put a little effort in, you can start drawing additional cards every turn in a format where no one else can do that. So it's a very big deal. So, how do we do that in a format like Junkion, where you only can play commons? Well, we have a list of enablers and payoffs here that I've looked into and I think are worth playing, at least somewhat. Um, you have for enablers, you have Bumblebee Trusted Lieutenant, who can flip to his alt mode to play an action. He's not a specialist. In fact, on this list, there's only one specialist for character enablers that I think are worth playing, but anyway, so Bumblebee says you can flip him to play an action. Private Flak has a tap ability, which is scrap an orange to play an upgrade. He's a 5-star. His stats aren't very good, but he is an option if you really wanted to do that. Raider Laserbeak is a cool one because his flip to, or not flip, his tap ability, sorry, in bot mode is to play a secret action, as well as just being reasonably statted. He has 2 Pierce 2, so he's always going to deal damage. But that tap ability is where he really becomes an enabler for a lot of the blue strategies, where you can play that secret action, survive a little bit longer, and also counts as a card play for Lost. Chromia is the only specialist on this list. Her flip to alt mode says you can play a blue armor, so basically play reinforced plating or play Guardian Shell and Junkion. But also when you're defending in bot mode, you can draw 2 cards just by flipping double blue. So you get that extra card flow by drawing a card every defense. Hound isn't a specialist, but plays an armor utility whenever he flips to bot mode. So that can be your third card play, and he's gonna get a lot out of just the pocket processor half, not necessarily the specialist half. But then you have Merkby, who um, is just a good character on his own, and has the flip ability to alt mode to play a utility or draw a card. So even if you don't necessarily have that utility to play, you just get card filtering or card drawing. For battle cards, New Designs isn't on this list because I do not think it's worth playing at all, um, unless you're specifically like Astro Train. But for ones that are worth playing are Brainstorm, because it just lets you play 2 additional actions. Confidence lets you filter cards, and if you're all Autobots, play an action. So if you're all Decepticons, though, you have access to Swindled, which also gives you the draw 2 discard 2, and but it lets you play an upgrade if you're all Decepticons. Those are really the 2 orange enablers in the deck for battle cards. So if you wanted to be more aggressive and more leaning towards one tribe or the other, those are some options. And then you have War of Attrition, which this is going to go with all the collectible upgrades and actions, across all formats is really cool because normally you'd want to save them till you could play all three, but with Lost in Research you can have it where you play only two of them and then play the other card types. So for War of Attrition, that would be playing two wars and then playing an upgrade, and all of a sudden Lost in Research is on. And once it's on, if you only play like one or two, you get an attack buff for each one you play as well as their normal effect. So it gives you extra value for not having all these cards in hand, because I've had it a lot where War of Attrition ends up being a feels bad moment when you flip two of them at once, but with this, it's not necessarily as big of a feels bad. But then we have the payoffs. So for the payoffs, we have 3 5-stars, which are cheap characters that are going to let you just be able to play your Lost in Research legally, but also they get value off of it. Skydive probably gets the least amount of value because he's just like a value character that's going to live long because he has Tough 2 and is a specialist, so he's a character who just like is notorious for living long in the WotC era, so I expect him to be just a good option if you want to have a cheap character to let you play Lost. But Alpha, Bravo, and Breakdown get a lot of benefit out of the when you play an action, get an extra attack point. Alpha, Bravo in bot mode is only 2 attack, but has Pierce 3, so when Lost is on, if you play an action, he gets that extra attack point to enable the full Pierce 3. But if that action is something, say, like Calculated Strike, you go to Pierce 5 attack, or 5 attack, Pierce 5. So you start dealing about a third of a character's health per swing, which can be really powerful from your little 5-star. Breakdown is importantly not a flipper, but whenever you flip double blue, which I had mentioned it before, a lot of the Lost in Research decks are going to lean blue. He gets an additional 2 attack. Pair that with something like Flame War, who's another specialist, and her strat. All of a sudden you're getting a leap into battle whenever you flip double blue. So that's a lot of extra attack points you just gain there. The really spicy payoffs, though, are Autobot Gears and Thundercracker Volant Virtuoso. So, Autobot Gears with Sabotage is a pretty understated 8-star, don't get me wrong, but the effect you get for playing him, especially in Junkion, is that you turn off almost all of your opponent's upgrades. So, things like Bashing Shields and Guardian Shells and Field Communicators, Enforcement Batons, all this stuff is no longer going to trigger when it comes into play. And Gear Up's entering the format now, so the Hound ability also doesn't trigger despite it not being an upgrade itself. It triggers when an upgrade is played. So he won't trigger. So Gears has always struggled with damage output more than anything. So getting the extra attack for when you play in action means that he can go from like 4 attack to 6 attack to 9 attack if that one of those actions is Leap into Battle. Thundercracker is just like Mock Warrior in Wave 1. It gets extra attack points whenever you play specific card types. For him, it's blank battle cards. So secret actions, when played, are actually blank, are considered blank when you play them from hand, or anywhere for that matter. So he gets an additional attack for playing the secret actions. He gets an additional attack from things like Blade Flurry. He gets additional attack from things like EM24. So, and he's a specialist, so Lost in Research gives him additional attack for each of those that are actions. So, he's a really powerful character. A really cool line you can do is you draw your card from Lost in Research, scrap a card from your hand to play a secret action. He gets +2 because it's blank and he's a specialist, so he's up to 7 base. Then you can play something like a laser launcher for turn. He gets +1 attack from a blank, +3 from the weapon. All of a sudden he's 11. When he attacks, he gets an additional attack point from having a blank upgrade, so all of a sudden he's 12 attack. But then Blade Flurry is the real kicker with him, where if you have a weapon and completed Lost in Research, it's a +6 action. So you go from 12 to 18, which is going to kill like most characters in most formats. Very powerful character. He's going to be in a list I show later for more powerful formats in Junkion, but in Junkion, also, a lot of those combo pieces he wants are common, so something to keep in mind. So, taking all this into mind, I would want to play at least like 6 enablers in my decks minimum for any sort of combo strategy. For this one, I'm actually playing 7 because I have Laserbeak. He's the only non-specialist in this deck, but he just tapping to play a secret action turns on your Lost in Research much faster than you would normally. You also have your Brainstorms and your War of Attritions in this deck, so you can get the strat turned on pretty quickly. Once it's online, though, that's when this really starts ticking, because You have the pocket processor, so you're seeing a lot more cards than your opponent ever will in Junkion. Plus, you're playing a suite of discard spells between Never a Dull Moment, Interrogation, and Undermine. So between these six discard effects, if you play two of them in a turn, while seeing that additional card each turn, you're just getting way more card economy than your opponent, and because of that, you're just gonna out tempo them. So even though this deck isn't gonna have the highest like damage output, it's gonna be able to just outvalue your opponent. And with your grab inhibitors, you're gonna be digging for your piercing blasters. You're gonna deal consistent damage. It just won't be like big numbers, but you're also slowing your opponent down because you also have the Gears stratagem on top of that. Flame War won't start in bot mode, crucially, because Gears is an Autobot, but that's where Breakdown kind of comes in as the other character in this deck, where he doesn't flip, so Flame War just flips turn 1 and you send Breakdown, possibly for like 5 or 6 on turn 1. So you get a lot of damage from your, as Huffer's proven in Sturdy Boys, 6 attack on your lead attacker who doesn't flip can be a big deal. So, when you get to other formats though, that's when you start seeing additional payoffs and enablers. Big ones being It Works, the rest of the Collectathon upgrades, and Reverse Engineer. So It Works when played with Wheeljack Weapons Inventor because you have to. He's a specialist in alt mode, so he also enables Lost in Research innately and gets the extra attack for the extra actions. But It Works says if you began the game with only Autobots, the strat can tap to draw 2 cards and discard 2, and then you may play an armor utility. So you get this one-shot like pseudo confidence effect, which also means on your first full turn you get to turn on your Lost in Research as long as you have a armor utility and an action and dig with that draw 2 discard 2, or in your opening hand even have another action or another upgrade to play for that turn. And then once that's online, you start just digging for a bunch of cards. Reverse Engineer is an ATP 5 card that I expect to see a lot more play now. It's a specialist green, so Lost in Research already wants specialist. You're going to be able to find it. Energize is introduced. Reverse Engineer lets you KO cards from the opponent's scrap. And if they have an upgrade in their scrap, you can play an upgrade that shares a type with any upgrades in their scrap. So that becomes your third card play for turn. So it's basically a green pip that finds you your additional card play. I kind of went over with War of Attrition the point of the collectathons, so I'm not going to go too much into that. But they're there. You have extra padding and attack drone. Attack drone probably will only see play in the gear up combo deck, but extra padding is going to be a lot more prevalent in blue decks specifically because tough matters now that belligerence is gone. An example of these kind of being played in T1 is going to be an Alita Works deck. It's a deck I actually am very fond of in Titan 1. It took me to a top 8 last event. You did lose Knack and Belligerence, but with Knack and Belligerence gone, you can get to make room for these extra extra turn-ons for your Lost in Research. So it's almost like a one-for-one swap for the most part. And Ariel's a specialist on both sides. Highbrow replaces your 6-star. You can also do Ratchet in this slot if you really want to as well, or there's a bunch of other specialist options. But basically it's another character to get attack from Lost in Research. I chose Highbrow because he gets an extra defense on your biggest guy, so Wheeljack will be more defense. When he dies, Ariel will be more defense, and it just lets your your major threats live a little bit longer despite being an aggressive deck. So I think that this deck is a very unexplored archetype. Lost in Research it gives this archetype like that extra oomph that you get that it was maybe missing a little bit before, despite I still think it being a powerful deck before. But getting that Lost in Research now means that you're an aggro deck that gets to see all these extra cards, dig for your turbo boosters, could even play ready for actions in this deck, dig for your pumps. It just lets you dig for all these additional cards or get really powerful like double pump turns to where you can just blow characters up. This is a deck I would very much think to see play going forward in Titan 1. But if you don't want to play Titan 1 or the tournament's going to be a different format, we have Classic, where you can't play Titans or Legends. And in Classic, I have 2 lists actually to show off. The first one is going to be a double Thundercracker list featuring Bonsaitron, who's almost never seen any play, but he actually might see some play thanks to Lost in Research. So I covered Volant Virtuoso and Junkion, so I'm not going to cover him again too much. We kind of know his big combo. Mock Warrior, he isn't a specialist himself, but he gets +1 attack in bot mode whenever an action is played, so just getting to play 2 actions a turn means you can swing for like 7 base, assuming none of them are pumps, and if they're pumps it just goes up from there. Him and some other Wave 1 characters, or just characters in general, that are very close, we'll see another one in the next example, probably could never get a stratagem on their own because the way that their cards are designed can lead to some very negative play patterns if given too much help. They're probably close to fringe playable already, so giving them access to Lost in Research can push them into that playable range, or at least a consideration for decks. But Bonsai is a specialist enabler for this deck. He's a tank, so that gives you access to the card Hunker Down, as well as his flip ability says you can flip him to alt mode, and if he has an armor on him, look at your opponent's hand and play a secret action. The way it's worded means that you can play Hunker Down as your first card for turn, flip him to alt mode, pick up an armor. Now it'll check that you had an armor, so you get to play a secret action. That's card number 2. Play an armor or any other upgrade from hand. That's card number 3. And now your Lost in Research is online to start churning through your giant attackers. So I think apart from the Hunker Down play, you probably don't flip him too often. You probably want to be flipping Mock Warrior to deal 2 damage to melee characters, or you could even just, keep flipping Bonsai to get that value. But this deck also just is like 38 health on a classic lineup, so very healthy team. It's all blue, other than like the whites and the black pips, so it's going to be very durable. But it's also able to hit the big like 18 swings from Thundercracker, Volant Virtuoso. It can hit big swings with Mock Warrior. So this is a deck I'm excited to play as well because I just enjoy Mock Warrior's playstyle. I'm not necessarily a Storm player in Magic, but I do enjoy the play lots of card decks. But we also got another stratagem in ATP 6 that was shown off recently, and that's for this ATP 3 Slipstream. So she isn't a specialist; she's a range character, but with this stratagem, she goes from 11 health to 12 health on a 7-star, with 3 defense in alt mode, because each Decepticon on your team that has focus gets +1 defense. She gains focus in the alt mode, and then whenever your opponent reveals 1 or more cards from either their hand or their deck, if Slipstream is on your team, zap an enemy. So this has a really cool pairing with some cards that make your opponent reveal cards, as well as her flip ability, to where you just get that extra value of zapping a character when you play them or you flip her, and you just get these like 2-for-1 scenarios, 3-for-1 scenarios that you normally wouldn't have. And I'm a big mid-range player in Magic, and if I can get as many like 2-for-1s, 3-for-1s as possible, I'm a big fan. So we have Slipstream and Behind Enemy Lines paired with Decepticon Shockwave and Flame War. So when I mention characters that probably can never get a stratagem, Decepticon Shockwave is probably the biggest example of this. The amount of damage he can put out in a combo turn is unmatched by any other character in the game. Yes, he only has 11 health, but if you give him any more health or any more help, you risk pushing this very explosive, degenerate play pattern to a whole new extreme. So Lost in Research might actually just be like, quote-unquote, a stratagem for him without actually printing a stratagem for him. He already wants your opponents to be discarding cards, so Interrogation and Electro-Optical Visor make your opponent reveal cards, so they deal damage as well as discard. Which means if you can pair them with Shockwave's ability, all of a sudden, Interrogation reads, deal a damage to one of your guys, your opponent reveals their hand, deal a damage to an enemy, scrap a card from your opponent's hand that has 1 or less battle icons, then they choose a character to take a damage. So you get 2 damage plus a discard effect for a card and 1 damage. Electro-Optical Visor is a +1 defense armor that lets you scrap an Autobot card. So it reads, play it, get in defense, scrap an uh, scrap an Autobot card from your opponent's hand, zap an enemy, and they pick a character to take a damage. So this combination just gets you this massive like chain reaction of out of combat damage. Normally, Shockwave's combo would be interrupted by something like Sturdy, but because of Lost in Research getting you that extra play, you can play something like Must Die sometime off of the action from Lost in Research, and this gives you the ability to turn off Sturdy and then follow it up with your system reboot combos, putting your 7, 8 damage out, or just like 3 or 4 if you're playing just the one reboot, but even still, he's a specialist, so he's getting extra attack points from that. Flame War is here just to help these guys survive, and being a specialist on her own, you can do things where you buff her by playing cards. The tough helps your team survive. So this deck's probably pretty weak to pierce and direct damage, but you do have absorption core for the direct damage, and if it's a best of 3 format, you can sideboard your stable covers for the pierce. But against other like strategies that aren't just pierce or burn, I think that this is a very solid option. Another interaction I want to mention is that Paralyzo Box works with Slipstream's ability as well, so it doesn't really have a fail rate anymore, because at worst it's zapping an enemy whenever you attack with the upgraded character. So I'm cool with, getting that trade-off, that sometimes it's grenade launcher plus a damage, other times it's just zap. So pretty good interactions right there. I want to play this deck. It can be very degenerate, but it's also just doing really cool things. In general, like it's a very unique way to play the game. It can turn on Lost in Research very fast thanks to the brainstorms, the swindleds, the war of attritions, the extra paddings. Like this has multiple ways to turn on your Lost in Research and just start ripping your opponent's hand apart, tempoing them out of the game. So it's a really, really cool strategy that I am excited to try. So with that, that is kind of how I would build decks with Lost in Research, kind of my thought process on why I would choose certain cards, how many payoffs and enablers you want to be playing, different formats we looked at. Let me know if Lost in Research is a card you're excited about. Are there other ATP 6 cards we've shown off that you're excited about? Let me know. And until next time, thanks.